The Rover 75 is in full build production at Cowley. We start the second shift soon, and all those stories about build quality and doors not fitting are malicious rumours put round by Jaguar and Volkswagen because they're frightened of what this car will do to their sales. Well, that's the party line from Rover, stung by adverse press comment on the 75 before it's even arrived in the showrooms. And it's no wonder Rover are protective about their new baby. There's a great deal riding on the success of the car. The 800 series it replaces is by now positively creaking, launched some 13 years ago, and the 75 is up against formidable opposition. Declared target cars are Audi's A4 and A6, the Mercedes C-Class, Vauxhall Opel Omega and Alfa 156. But the car also bears an uncanny resemblance to Jaguar's new S-Type. Since the launch at the Motor Show last year, there's been a lot of publicity about the 75, not all of it favourable. The styling, for a start, is distinctly retro, harking back to the car's namesake, the Rover 75 of the 1950s, with its distinctive Cyclops single spot lamp in the centre of the grille. That's one styling cue that hasn't been carried over, but the chrome, the curved panels and the wooden leather interior definitely have been. Is it an image worth having? Rover in the 50s and 60s represented solidly middle-class conservative values. It was the car the country doctor drove, your rich auntie and uncle swept sedately down to the golf course in, and the Queen Mum waved from the window of her 3-litre as it whisked her through the gates of Clarence House. Now, is that something we cherish and aspire to in the new millennium? If it doesn't work, the future of car building at Cowley and at Longbridge will be in serious doubt, and the Anglophiles at BMW who believed in and pushed for an oldie English Rover renaissance will be even more unpopular with their shareholders. Rover say the 75 is a car owners will be proud of. They'll want to glance back fondly as they walk away from parking it. If it doesn't sell, there'll be a lot of executives looking fearfully back over their shoulders as they walk away from the 75.
It's amazing to think that the management of two such influential car companies as Rover and BMW, which are effectively the same company anyway, could go to such extraordinary lengths to completely overshadow the launch of a new model, and a model that could be the saviour for Rover cars. Now, I'm talking about the new Rover 75. It's our first chance here today to see it, and your first chance on network television to review just how good the Rover 75 could be. And it could be the saviour for the Rover car company. Now, in case you've been out of the country for the past couple of weeks or been asleep, the boardroom battle at BMW, which led to the removal of Chairman Bernd Pischrieder, are the problems that we're talking about. Bernd Pischrieder was the guardian angel for Rover cars. But what we want to see is whether Rover have succeeded in producing an executive express, a car that can take on the likes of BMW, Audi, Mercedes, and even the Alfa 156. On first looks, the car seems big, grand, and with a somewhat regal presence to it, not unlike the Rovers of the 1950s and 1960s, and that is completely intentional. This car wouldn't look out of place parked outside number 10 Downing Street. It also reminds you very much of the new Jaguar S-Type, a sweeping rear end, lots of chrome on the exterior, and those two front headlights, and rather interesting that both cars were launched at the same time at the British Motor Show. The 75 is a replacement for both the 600 and 800 in the Rover range, and in terms of size it sits slap bang in the middle of those two cars. It's bigger than a 3 Series, an Audi A4 or a Mercedes C-Class. So maybe this car is beginning to move into the next segment, a 5 Series size car for the price of a 3 Series one. Now, stepping inside the 75 is almost an event in itself. It's almost retro styling gone completely mad, but personally I love the wonderful styling inside here. Lots of chrome, lots of wood. You can have the option of leather, and these gorgeous oval dials with the cream background are so reminiscent of the Art Deco era of the 1920s and 1930s. Now, you can choose from a choice of 3 different trim levels. There's the basic classic, there's the club, which is this particular model, and the most luxurious connoisseur versions. However, it's just been announced that the cheapest classic model will not be available back in the UK until the end of the year. Why, oh why, do they shoot themselves in the foot? 75 does drive very well. It's smooth, it's quiet, and the handling really is as good as Rover claim. Now, we've had some pretty awful road surfaces to contend with here in Spain, but the 75 has just soaked them up with ease, and on the motorway at cruising speeds there's hardly any wind noise into the cabin. Now, talking to one of the Rover executives at dinner last night, he said that Rover might just go back into the North American market with 75, and you can imagine this car on the roads of America. It's almost been engineered and designed with that slightly in mind, and surely the Americans would love it. The 75 is a car that if you want to push it hard and have a bit of fun in, you certainly can. The steering is nicely weighted, it has a smooth feel over differing surfaces. The gearbox, though, is perhaps not as slick as I would have liked, but maybe it's just the one that we've got on the test car here. This new 2-litre V6 power plant in the 75 is very smooth, it revs freely, but for me, it just lacks a little bite. A bit extra power would be nice. The car to go for, I would think, would be the 2.5 V6, which has a lot more power, a lot more oomph, and will be the car to give you enjoyment. Now, the starting point of a car is, of course, its chassis, and in the 75, it's excellent. It's 2.5 times stiffer than the Rover 600, and going around these bumps and bends here, we found absolutely no body flex, and combined with BMW's superb rear Z-axle, it makes a great all-round package. So once you're safely sat inside your mini Bentley, you can see how well the car is equipped. Twin front airbags, electric windows, electric mirrors, radio cassette, leather steering wheel, and so the list goes on. The seating position is fully adjustable, but despite these seats being like armchairs, long-range comfort could be a problem. Rover have invested heavily in the 75, of course with the help of BMW, and £700 million has gone in design, development and the facilities at Oxford where the 75 is built. BMW bought Rover for £400 million and has so far invested £4 billion in the brand. But it's Rover's huge losses which cause the demise of the BMW bosses. Estimates of Rover's losses range at anything from £200 to £400 million. Whatever it is, it's certainly a huge amount of money. So the overall feeling is that Rover have produced a winner. With the 75 you can have some rather wacky colour schemes like this top-of-the-range yellow connoisseur. But the key question is, who will actually buy the 75? They need to get away from that local vicar who drives a Rover feeling and tempt new buyers into the mark. They need to tempt buyers away from the likes of BMW, Mercedes, Audi and even the Alfa 156. Prices have just been announced for the new 75. They start at £18,225, ranging to £25,625 for the top-of-the-range connoisseur model. But would it tempt, say, a 30-something dashing executive from an Alfa 156? Well, perhaps not. But if the 75 becomes your company car and it's sat at home in your driveway, be sure that the neighbours will be giving it some envious glances.
Well, I've learnt a new phrase today and it's quickly becoming a favourite. It's tailor welded blanks, which is also adding to the improvements of this car. What on earth is a tailor welded blank, Martin?
Well, we've used them in one or two areas across the vehicle, but there's a prime example here. A tailor welded blank. The blank refers to the material in its flat state before any pressing operation has taken place. And what we can do is actually weld together panels of two different thicknesses before actually starting to press that panel. So if you like, we're doing the assembly operation before the pressing operation. And here's a classic case on the car. The door inners on both the front and the rear are made from tailor welded blanks. The weld line, you can just make it out here.
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
It's a continuous laser welded seam in the blank. This material here is 1.8 millimeters thick, but just here it's only 0.8. So we've got the thickness and the stiffness and the strength where we need it, which is close to the hinge mounting points, so that from a door stiffness point of view, that's very good.
One of the elements that the design team for the new Rover 75 are particularly proud of is the stiffness of the body shell. It's 2.5 times stiffer than the Rover 600 series. And for these improvements, they took the BMW 5 Series as their benchmark. Well, to find out exactly what all that means, here's Martin Walker from the body structure team. Hiya. Body stiffness, what does it mean?
Body stiffness, we can think about that in two ways. First of all, the global stiffness of the body structure and the way in which it can actually resist forces that are looking to try and twist it or bend it. The forces you might get from running over a bump in the road. And we can also think about the local stiffness effects, which is really trying to get areas where the engine mounts fit or where the chassis fits to be as stiff as possible so that there's no creaking or rattling as a result.
Does it improve the drive performance as well to have a really stiff body and chassis?
Having a stiff body allows the chassis to behave properly because the chassis is reacting all its loads against a very stiff structure rather than against something that might actually move itself.
Now you're saying it's 2.5 times stiffer than the Rover 600.
That's right.
So what improvements have you made? How have you done it?
This is what we call a body section, and it's the way in which we actually join the different panels together. What we've done with this is try and make the section as large as possible, because making that section large is making all the metal work as much as possible. And by making it large, we haven't added to the weight that much, but we have added to all the sectional properties there, which improve its resistance to bending and to twist. Underneath the floor here, we have some more sections like this, slightly smaller, that run from the back to the front of the vehicle. You can see either side of the spare wheel well, we have what we call the rear longitudinals, which is a box section about 100 millimeters square, which runs underneath there and then runs and dives out into this section just underneath the rear door. This section then runs along underneath the doors, and as it comes up to the front of the car, so again it dives back into the dash area, and that then comes forward into the front longitudinals, similar section sizes, forming a very stiff underframe on which we can then mount the upper structure.
Okay, so the driver of the new 75 will notice what, particularly about the stiffness of the handling? How will they notice the improvements?
I think they will notice the improvements in its wind noise improvement, the refinement, if you like, throughout the vehicle. Absence of squeaks and rattles, because a stiff body structure isn't going to start any of the other components that attach to it moving relative to each other and therefore starting a squeak or a rattle. And I think a lot of the drivers who have driven the car previously on our prototype vehicles have said, wow, that's a stiff body structure, isn't it? It has actually been a part of the body that they've noticed its contribution, whereas normally you don't tend to look at it that closely.
Excellent, Martin, thank you very much. I look forward to trying it out myself next year.
So do I.
Well, this is not the Rover 75. In fact, it's a Jaguar S-Type, and it does look sort of similar. After the break, the rivals of the Rover 75. In part one, we focused on the Rover 75, which has to be successful for the company. In this part, we look at some rivals.
It's the most amazing revival since Tony Blair and the Labour Party got back into power. I'm talking about the return from the brink of extinction of Jaguar, that great British car name. And this is the very latest evidence of the return to glory days of E-Class, Inspector Morse's Mark II. This is a sensational S-Type. It's the hottest property in the motoring world today. I'm the lucky holder of the keys to this car, and I'm looking forward to this drive like I haven't looked forward to a drive for a long time. This is the car that is putting the fear of the god up the German luxury car market at the moment, and you can understand why. You just got to look at it from the outside, and you get inside, it's pure class. This car, if it drives as well as it looks, is going to be a monstrous winner. I'm driving the new Jaguar 3-litre engine because it's the first V6 Jaguar ever produced, and it's got the manual gearbox. Manuals were not a strong Jaguar point in the past. The other engine is the superb 4-litre V8 that's already got wide acclaim in the XK8 and the XJ. That in this car makes it a tremendously smooth motor. But I have to say that for me, the automatic is still the best Jaguar to have. The manual gearbox will appeal to the sporty drivers who like the involvement of changing gear a lot, but for me, Jaguar with this engine as well, automatic would be the one for me. Start and put the Jag through its paces, get it on some twisty, winding roads, and push it hard. And the handling does everything you'd expect. It really does hug the road well. It copes well with any type of sort of deviation in the road surface. This is a Jag that can be hustled. Pricing's also pretty competitive. You get a starting price with the 3 litre at 28,600, and you go up to a top of the range 37,600 for the 4 litre SE. The big thing about the S-Type is that it's going to lead an all new generation of Jaguar cars, which is going to see Jaguar triple its production from 50,000 to over 300,000 in the year 2002, 2003, which is unbelievable a few years ago. And that's going to mean one thing: serious problems for the German boys. BMW, Audi, Mercedes, they're all going to lose sales to Jaguar. Think Jaguar and you instantly think style. When it comes to blending wood and leather, nobody can quite match us Brits. They've all tried, but when it comes to a touch of class, Jaguar are showing the rest of the way. Executive cars demand real comfort, and the Jaguar is a winner in the comfort stakes. Seats are very comfortable, very good long-distance cruisers. So, my verdict on the Jaguar S-Type? Well, the boys from Jaguar have done it again. This is the type of Jag that gives you that feel-good-to-be British factor. I suggest that Jaguar are going back into the big time, just like the glory days of the Mark II. And they're going to have one thing in common: they're both going to be huge successes. Oh, just another thought as well for the people at BMW and Rover. Here's a perfect example that proves you can bring a great British car name back from the dead. Take a look, boys. It should give you hope.
Look amazing, don't they? But would you want to marry one? Do you think you could live with one?
And until fairly recently, that's a statement that you could have applied to Italian cars. Great bodies that demanded rather too much attention underneath the bonnet. The motoring equivalent of having a gorgeous but slightly unpredictable supermodel on your arm.
Those days, however, do seem to be over. Meet the supermodel with brains, who also knows how to have fun, the Alfa 156. Carrying on Alfa's tradition, the 156 is indeed the stuff that supermodels are made of. Its looks would happily put many of them to shame. And happily, it'll cost you far less to get this beauty out of the garage in the morning than it does to get Claudia Schiffer and the gang out of bed. Just £17,600 will put you behind the wheel of a 156, and I reckon it's a small price to pay for such a vision.
However, this 156 will make a slightly larger dent in your bank balance, because on this version the beauty isn't merely skin deep. Underneath the bonnet you'll find an absolutely amazing 24-valve 2.5 litre V6 engine, the roar from which will make your chest hairs stand on end and will considerably soften the blow when you write out your cheque for £22,300. Now, while you gaze in admiration, taking in the beauty of this car, let me fill you in on its pedigree.
Created by quite possibly the sexiest race on earth, the 156 was designed in Alfa Studio in Milan, a town that simply oozes style and passion. It has unmistakable Alfa styling cues all over it, the classic whiskers that run down to the headlights, the unmistakable V on the bonnet. And like the finest of supermodels, it knows that it's the little details that make all the difference.
Like the way the boot key is cleverly hidden underneath the Alfa badge. The discreet rear door handles that make the 156 seem like it's a coupe. The gorgeous design of the key, it just begs out to be fondled. And what about the feel of the retro silver door handles in your hands? How long before these inspire a whole host of pretenders? That retro feeling of the silver handles is carried on the interior. It's absolutely gorgeous. It has curves in all the right places. And the deep instrument panels really add to the sporty feeling of the 156. And I just love the way this mahogany steering wheel feels in your hands. The leather sport seats do come as an extra, but I reckon they're so much nicer than the velour ones that come as standard, they're worth saving up for.
All in all, the 156 is the kind of car that it's a pleasure to wake up to in the morning. But of course, as we all know, looks aren't everything. Personality counts as well. And even the entry-level 1.8 version is packed with it. So that must mean that this V6 is the life and soul of the party.
And it is, with 120 brake horsepower to keep you entertained and a top speed of 142 miles an hour to amuse you, this car is absolutely packed with fun. Now the 6-speed gearbox is as smooth as silk, and the roar that you get from that V6 will really send you into raptures. Now you can feel the power from the engine the moment that your foot hits the accelerator. It goes like a rocket, but it's once you get to 4,000 revs that this engine really begins to sing. These seats feel firm and they feel supportive, and they add to the sporty feeling of the 156. And as I've said before, I just love the steering wheel. That also adds to the whole sportiness of the car. It really is just fantastic fun to drive.
Driving the 156 will put a huge smile on your face, and it gets about as much attention as a supermodel as well. Every time I left it parked up, I returned to find admirers, all wanting a closer look. So, the Alfa has got the gorgeous looks and the personality you'd expect from a driver's car.
That was certainly the case with the Alfas of old, but the 156 really is in a different league. It feels solidly built and it simply oozes quality. And although it's too early to tell how all that will hold up over time, industry experts reckon that the 156 is going to have very high resale values, a sure sign that this car is built to last.